Taking an audition is a very unnatural situation. It's a very artificial situation, and we know that. And I think that you should relax and know that we understand it's a very tense, very difficult, very strange situation to be behind that screen for 15 or 20 minutes. The more you do it, the easier it becomes. I would encourage you to take as many auditions as you can. Practice auditions whatever you can to feel more comfortable with them. Don't be judgmental of yourself. Try and present who you are as a musician in a very positive way to the people who are listening to you. It's easy to say not to worry, but generally the people who are into the music and involved in what they're doing musically and not so much worrying about being judged are the people who are more successful. The more you do that, the easier it becomes. The more you can do it in school, the more you can do it in situations where even if you know there's not a chance right then for you to win that job, take the audition anyway. And take it with a very positive frame of mind. Timpani and percussion auditions are especially challenging for us because not only of the variety of instruments that we're listening to in a percussion audition, but also the fact that we have to listen behind a screen. The judges are sitting behind a screen, so that we can't rely on our eyes to tell us anything. We're listening only to the sound that we hear. And we have to be very concentrated on that, which is good because we're paying incredible attention to detail. But we can't rely on watching a person play, which is always a great part of what makes a percussionist and timpanist great. So we rely on accuracy, of course, and we rely on sound. For me, the sound that is created on whatever, from a triangle to a timpani, is what makes the difference between a good player and a player that's going to enhance the sound of an entire orchestra. And I feel that that really is true. A great timpanist, a great percussionist adds a level of sound, a quality of sound that forms a sort of texture of the orchestra that helps to create a great orchestral sound. So sound, most of all, is critical. When we're listening to auditions also, we're listening, of course, for accuracy. We're listening for attention to detail in the score. Does the person pay close attention to dynamics? Is rhythm perfect? Very often you're going to be asked to perhaps start your audition with a marimba solo. And that's very important. And I know that for percussionists, you're so focused on detail and you're such perfectionists about what you do in every way that sometimes that focus on detail and that perfectionism doesn't lend itself to the flow of a larger piece. I mean, you enter and exit pieces and you're always noticed and you're always brilliant, but the idea of a long stretch of music and creating an overall direction for the piece is what we're listening for when you play the marimba solo. We're listening for your musicianship. I mean, your sound, of course, your accuracy, but very much your musicianship and what you tell us about yourself. And playing Bach on marimba is unusual. I mean, certainly Bach would not have thought of it, but I think he would have loved it if he'd heard you play his music on marimba. It's a very beautiful thing. But when you're preparing for this, I would encourage you, listen to a violinist play Bach, listen to cellists play Bach, listen to singers sing an aria from a Bach cantata. Learn how people approach longer lines in Bach, and then free yourself to do with your personality. I think, again, you want to be yourself. No one is expecting that we're going to have accurate Baroque style Bach. We want to hear what you do with a singing line, how you make connections, and who you are as a musician. And that sets the stage for everything else you do. And again, just to encourage you to think about your focus on accuracy is welcome, and we need that, and that makes you a great player. But don't neglect what is going to be really important in your orchestral life, and that is what the piece means, the entire piece means. Your presence in the symphony is about the whole symphony, and what you bring to it, your sound, your understanding of the piece, your understanding of the style, your knowledge of what's happening around you when you're playing and when you're not playing is critical to your success. So the more experience you have as a musician in orchestra, the better. The more listening experience, not to percussionists maybe, but to other instrumentalists, to singers, really informs who you are as a percussionist. So you focus very narrowly, and that's very important. But as you develop as a musician, broaden that focus to things that you never thought would influence you. Listening to a tenor sing an aria from a Puccini opera can really influence how you approach your art. Well, take snare drum, for instance. You have to realize, first of all, that most conductors who are listening to percussion auditions are not percussionists. So they're listening as musicians, not as a person who has studied each instrument in detail. They're listening for the musicianship behind what you're playing. The Bartók Concerto for Orchestra, the Game of the Pairs, starting out with this wonderful solo for snare drum. They're listening to the quality of sound of that snare drum. They're listening to the dynamic level. They're listening to your view of setting up this amazing tour de force for orchestra that you control because you're the first sound that we hear. So think of it as a musical thing, not as something that's only technical. Lieutenant Kijé, you may be agonizing over your four-stroke roughs and trying to make it as unbelievably clear as possible. But the person on the committee, the conductor, the violinist, the cellist, the oboist, they're listening for music. And the little things that you might be concentrating on might actually prevent you from seeing the overall picture of what does the music mean in that piece. That's not to say you want to sacrifice accuracy, but you don't want to lose the forest for the trees. You don't want to lose the sense of the music and the piece for the technical details that we on the committee are not paying as much attention to as you think we are. Speaking about xylophone and bells, again, I go back to sound, because that's what I'm listening for as a conductor, and I think that's what the general orchestra members are listening for as well. We're not going to tell you what melody to use, but we might ask for particular sound. And if you play these pieces in orchestra, you'll notice that your conductor will ask for sound. I mean, types of sound, quality of sound. It's up to you to translate that in a way that makes sense for you, your equipment, and your approach to the instrument. But sound and style is incredibly important. When you play Porgy and Bess, it's with a kind of color and a brilliance and a security and a rhythmic kernel of energy that we need. And we need that because, of course, we're relying, when we conduct that piece, the xylophone is the second conductor. I mean, we rely on that exactly. We want to hear that kind of accuracy, but we want to hear it with a beautiful sound. If we ask for something else, let's say from bells, Debussy, that again needs your complete imagination in how you approach that. Don't take it out of context. Listen to recordings. Ask your teacher, if it's the first time you're playing the excerpt, how does it work in orchestra? What's happening around you? Are the woodwinds playing? Are you playing with woodwinds alone? Are you playing with brass? All of that is important because that is how the conductor is listening to it. When I listen to your excerpt, I'm hearing in my head the orchestra around you. And so I'm seeing, how is that going to fit in? Is the style completely in a different realm? Or is it with the sense of color that this is a beautiful moment in La Mer, that we need the most beautiful sound from the bells? So keep that overall picture in mind when you play these excerpts. I think it must be especially difficult to take an audition on cymbals, but I have to say that in orchestra, for me, they're one of the most important sounds I hear ever. And the wide variety of sounds from the cymbals can create a magical performance or can interrupt a musical sensibility. Cymbals, your choice of cymbals is critical. Again, know the piece, know the texture around you. Make sure the pitch of the cymbal is right. Many times I find in orchestras that cymbal players may make choices of cymbals that don't quite fit when they're playing an orchestra with the pitches around them. You need to be able to have that sense. Does it need to be a deep sound? And sometimes conductors, and I do this as well, will talk about cymbal playing in terms of sounds like splashy or with a swoosh that we hope you will translate into exactly the technique of playing. But when you come and play these excerpts, you have to have that sound in mind. And don't be afraid to be dramatic on these instruments too. I think sometimes people come in and take auditions on any instrument and they tend to play it really safe. And I understand the reason for that. We don't want to do anything that is very odd, or odd tempos or odd dynamics, but you do want to play with personality. And when you're playing for a group of judges behind a screen, you've got to times that by 3 or 4 times, because you've got to get through that screen into the judge's imagination. Remember, you might be the 42nd person they're hearing. They want to hear some spark, and we can't hear it. So again, as you're playing this, imagine that this is happening at the climatic moment in Rimsky-Korsakov, and we need that sound, we need that brilliance, we need that color, we need that effect that is going to make people in the audience understand what this music is about. Get there early, make sure you're prepared, be relaxed, don't rush in at the last moment, have the right equipment, don't rush. And there are many people who feel that they have to immediately play the next excerpt, or the judges will become impatient. We're not impatient. Take your time. Many times just taking a few moments to think about an excerpt before you play it makes the real difference in how you will play that excerpt. No one minds if you take that time. In fact, to me, it's a sign of someone who's really getting into the musical world of that piece before they play. And I think it's a very positive thing. Many players tell me, too, that they take 20, 30, 50 auditions before the right one happens. Don't give up on that. I mean, it's an arbitrary thing. Frankly, a lot of it is determined by good luck, how you're playing for that exact 15-minute slot on that exact day, who played before you, who's playing after you, how attentive the judges are to exactly your 15 minutes. It is a lot of good fortune and good timing, so don't give up on that, and be positive. And I think a life in an orchestra as a percussionist, as a timpanist, is one of the most wonderful experiences we can have, and it's certainly, for us in the orchestra, is one of the most important decisions that we make.